Okay.
Great. So it's really good to have you with us, Liz, and I will allow you to share something of who you are with the group. But just to sort of say that we've really been covering this session about how we look at morality and making decisions, but from the perspective of human dignity, and how certainly I feel when I read what the church teaches about it, that there's something so important about almost our basic Catholic human rights being upholding, protecting, and recognizing that each one of us is made in the image of God, and that should be the sort of the hallmark of the way that we treat each other and the way that we go about our decisions. So it's lovely to have you. I notice we're both wearing pink. I don't know if that's
totally unplanned.
Yes, absolutely. But there we go. So Liz, let me just begin by asking you to say something about yourself, who you are.
Okay. So I'm Liz Corcoran, and we're old friends. My background is actually I'm trained as a doctor, and I subspecialized into psychiatry as well. And I also have another kind of hat that I wear, that I help run a charity for medical research for people with Down syndrome, which is a condition that people are born with, where they have an extra chromosome. So the reason I'm involved with that is because my brother has Down syndrome.
Oh, wonderful.
So,
thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for the introduction. And apart from that, you're a very lovely human being, and I'm sure you'll have some pearls to share with us. So, maybe from the perspective, maybe from a personal perspective to begin with, having grown up with a brother with particular needs in a society where it's so easy to kind of dismiss people who are different, who who don't fit the mold or fit the box. What would be your experience of sort of human dignity in that, in an area as a sister, and in your experience growing up with that?
So, I mean, David, I was maybe 7 or 8 when he was born, and, he was brought home, and he was just another baby brother, right? It was, oh, great, here we go, another little baby crying, and mom's going to be distracted. But he was just my brother. I didn't think of him in any other way. And I think it's interesting, because as you grow up, you, like with your parents, you just expect to be unconditionally loved because you're their daughter, you're their son. If you're, fortunate, you grow up in a loving home, obviously, that there's no idea that you did anything to win that or earn that. This is just a free gift that you receive. As you get older and you're naughty and you get in trouble, you realize that actually you can push your luck, but your mom and dad, they love you no matter what. And I think the thing that blows my mind about being a Catholic and what we believe, that actually just because we are children of God, he loves us just because of that. We didn't do anything to earn it. We didn't do anything to get those loyalty points on a card to be able to say, okay, now we're finally good enough. And how that contrasts with the world. And I think that's one of the strongest examples is in someone like my brother, that all the time right now in medical consultations, pregnant ladies are being asked whether or not they want to keep their baby when they find out it has Down syndrome. And this idea that we've got to earn our right to be in this world is so sad, because our worth isn't dependent on that. Our worth is actually purely because we're children of God. That's where our dignity and our worth lies. And I wouldn't like it any other way. I work hard, and you do as well, Sophie. But no, there's always going to be someone out there to measure us against that makes us feel less than. And my brother is happy the way he is. He doesn't know anything different. He brings a lot of joy to our family. But I know we're both seen as equal in the eyes of God. He loves us both equal. I might make £1 million in my life, whatever, maybe. David won't make probably any money in his life. It doesn't matter. His life is still worthy in the eyes of God.
Wonderful. Yeah. And I think as I listen to you, that's really, we're talking about human dignity, and it's very basic, and that's lovely, because I think you've drawn out what the real meaning of it is. But then when it comes to, I suppose, there's a choice having to be made there, you know, a choice as a sister, as a family, still to love him, not as you say, for any ulterior motive, but just because of his place in your family. And I'm just thinking about some of the choices that we all have to make as Catholics, as individuals, whatever age we are. And in your role as a doctor, I mean, what I suppose there are lots of sort of issues that come up that require that kind of conscious choice. I'm just wondering how you bring that sort of Catholic thing that you've really shared with us there about human dignity and everyone's worth, and how that plays out or has played out. Maybe you have one or two examples from your work.
Yeah, I mean, probably we talked briefly there about like the times when you're really going to see how our values as Catholics are really in contrast with the world's values at the either end of our lives. So we talked a little bit about babies with Down syndrome not being welcomed in the womb. Well, actually, if we think a little bit about as people get older or get injured and they are in hospital, some of the things I've seen working as a junior doctor, right? So early when you're qualified, you're working on the hospital wards, and you see people who are elderly, and someone can be, you know, maybe like your nan or grandpa, busy and in the garden, and they fall and hurt themselves. And once they're in hospital, they're put in their hospital gowns. They're not wearing their normal clothes, their favorite hospital jersey, their favorite football shirt, or, you know, that jumper that your nana always wears. They're kind of stripped of their identity. And something that can happen that all doctors and nurses and people can be guilty of is that we just see an old person. We just see someone who's not got a lot to give anymore.
An old person in a gown.
Yeah, and they lose their personality, they lose their identity, and people begin to make judgments on how much we should try to save their life. Because it's not like in the movies where it's either do the shock or not do the shock. There's hundreds of little choices that we make that either push people towards gentle recovery or maybe don't help them to recover if that's possible. You know, everyone has to die at some point. That's a part of life. But there's times where maybe, you know, doctors and nurses could have been a bit more active in working to save people's lives. And it is something that's easily done. And the parameters, the rules that we make these decisions around are based on us. Like, what do we consider to be a worthwhile life? When you talk about someone who falls and breaks their back, you know, and people judge them, oh, I couldn't live like that. Well, actually, you don't know, because you've never been in that person's shoes. You, as an able-bodied person, can never fully appreciate how rich life is within that person's body now. They're now on a different journey and a path. And I think it's so dangerous to set your compass by the world's, you know, settings. And that's why I'm so thankful that I have my Catholic beliefs and values and morals, that I see every life as having value, and that every soul has a dignity and a worth, regardless of whether or not, you know, can Granny still get up and make the Sunday dinner anymore, you know?
So would you say it's not just about making almost dealing with the big issues, it's more the small decisions that when you're face to face with a person? Have you experienced that in your connection with patients, that it's as much about that as making the big sweeping kind of
Definitely.
decision in a way?
Yeah, definitely. It's about sitting down next to someone's bed and holding their hand and talking to them and looking at their eyes and making them feel that they do have value. I mean, Mother Teresa is a great inspiration here for that, because she went into places that people considered them no-go areas. And she touched the people that no one would touch, the people who were outcasts. Yeah. And we have modern places like that, you know, old age homes where people are left sitting on their own for days and hours. So I always tried to, you know, as much as time permits, because it's a very hard, busy job, sit down with people and help them to feel seen, help them to feel wanted and valued, because you don't know, you know, how long they have. And, you know, that's moments where you're God's hands and feet to
Yeah.
show them that they have that dignity and worth.
Yeah. So it's something about there, we're saying connecting ourselves to the person. And I think that links with really what you were saying there about Mother Teresa, linking sort of seeing the person. There's something important about that. And I was just thinking about our young people who are listening, and how I find, I mean, I'm a school teacher. I find at school it's very easy, even in social media and everything, it's very easy to sort of bring everything down to the level of it's either right or wrong. It's, you know, it's all, or it just is brought down to a sound bite, and we're not really thinking about the people behind the issue. So thank you, Liz, for sharing that, because I think you've brought that out nicely about seeing the person almost within the issue, rather than always weighing up, especially in our society where we can easily on Twitter just say, oh, I disagree or I agree, you know, and we kind of lose that, the personhood there. So thanks for that.
It just made me think of the, you know, when they talk to people who are begging on the street, you know, the thing that they say time and time again is actually, I wouldn't mind if people didn't give me money. It's just they don't look me in the eye anymore. And all the time we're surrounded by people that feel invisible, they feel worthless. Yeah. They're holding themselves to that ruler that the world gives, that says, if you don't earn anything, if you're not beautiful, if you don't have a Twitter following or Insta following, you're worthless. And the minute you fall outside of that kind of worldview, you know, you can feel like you don't belong on this planet anymore. And I know everyone listening to this right now, you are going to have moments in your life where you feel like that. And I just pray that that's when God comes and speaks in your heart, reminds you that you are not called to measure yourself by that ruler any longer, that Jesus died so that you could throw that in the bin.
Oh, thank you, Liz. Yeah. And I suppose what we've been doing this session is looking at the importance of recognizing ourselves and our own value, but also seeing that in another person. And it is definitely a two-way. Just in terms of sort of going back to our Catholic faith and how we bring it practically into the world. And I suppose this question comes at you from your professional point of view as well as your personal experience. Are there any sort of tips that you have for our young people, just in terms of what things as a Catholic we can draw on that will help us to make good and right decisions, as well as what you've already said about looking at the person and seeing the person? Is there anything in your Catholic faith that you found helpful as a kind of a steer?
I think it is really important to understand your own journey and what you bring, what you bring to the table. Not everyone has a perfect, actually, I haven't met anyone yet that's had a perfect childhood. You know, you're going to have difficulties, and being aware that that can affect how you see others. If you feel worthless, if you struggle with feelings of low self-esteem, ask God to help you with that. Speak to someone, you know, like get help for that, because that is going to affect your ability for God to use you to be able to pour out love, to be that kind person to the other that in your life. So that's really important, because God's trying to teach you how he sees you all the time, right? And the most important thing to remember at the heart of that is that you cannot be worthless. It's impossible, because Jesus wouldn't have died on that cross for you if you were worthless. And even if you were only one person on the planet, he still would have done that. So you may not feel like that's true, because there's a difference between believing and feeling, because feelings come and go. But what I've learned over time is that, you know, you've got to decide what you believe and put that in front of you and follow that. And that's so important, because like I said, there's days when I went into the ward and I was tired and I didn't feel like being compassionate. But I made a decision that I was going to do that. I'm not perfect. There's obviously, you know, will be things I'll make, mistakes I'll make, but that's what we've got confession for. That's that replenishing of that grace that God's given us. So yeah, that would probably be my tip. Remember who you are, why God made you, and you know, acknowledge your own wounds and let God help you heal them as well. And that gives you the you know, God can use you then to help others.
Wonderful, wonderful. And maybe, I suppose, as the last point, I'm just aware of time. Also been thinking about just this idea that free will is a big part of almost allowing us to, that we've got the privilege then of almost forming our direction in life. And then, of course, there's conscience, which is really important to make sure that's developed in some way. Again, any general thoughts about that in terms of how we can inform our conscience, or just maybe how we stand up for something as opposed to just kind of following the world or following the crowds on particular issues. I don't know, is there anything else that comes to mind?
It's tricky. It's obviously you guys are here for this course, right? And that's that's the kind of thing that's not quite true, because it's not a course, is it? So if it's lifelong, you and I are still learning.
Well,
We're
of course.
both, yeah. And I think that's how we met each other, is actually on that progress of learning and forming each other. You guys are, God's forming you and changing you and working on you. And it's a constant process of you saying yes and being open to that. It's about attending mass. It's about joining groups, learning, and opening your heart so that you can be filled with this good stuff, and be surrounded with other people that choose to live this way too, and supporting each other. There'll be days where you make mistakes, and God knows that. He's not gonna like be, oh, I never thought you would do that. He knows you'll make mistakes. And that's when you've got to keep going back and asking for forgiveness and starting again. I think the most important thing that you can do is, I like to always see my faith as like, I'm on this journey, I'm on this road. There may be times where like I sit down on a bench at the side, or I trip and I fall in the ditch. But the fact is, I want to always be going forward. I want to always be on that forward journey, moving towards being more like Christ, being, and laying down what my selfish things might be that I want to do, and being more like him. And seeing your journey, your faith journey, as a continuous. And obviously your confirmation is a massive, important like road stop on that journey. But it's not where you're going to stay. You guys have got to keep moving forward and keep journeying forward, because God has got some really exciting things that he wants you to do in this world. And I'm looking forward to hearing all about it, Sophie, hearing what they get up to.
Oh, well, thank you, Liz. I think those words hopefully there'll be something that touches each one. And I definitely got a lot of treasures from the words that you shared today. So thank you very much, Liz. I really appreciate it.